Last examples of the day. Now, you'll notice in this example, we're starting to put all of our cases together. I have a regular factor, I have an irreducible quadratic, and that irreducible quadratic is squared. It's repeated. So let's talk about, first off, this denominator is already factored, so I can skip step 1. But let's talk about the more important step of how do I split this up. Let's deal with the x first. That gets its own letter. Ax, that's my first factor. Plus, now I have a repeated factor, which means the first one's going to be alone, and the second one's going to be squared, just like we did when we did repeated factors. However, because this is an x squared, this top is a bx plus c. And because this is an x squared, this is a dx plus e. So this is a 5 by 5. 5 equations, 5 variables. However, I will tell you a lot of these variables end up solving for themselves. The system is still not that bad to solve for. But now that I've got it split up, which I've told you before really is the hardest step, splitting it up correctly. Once you have it split up, it's the exact same steps from here on out. So I know this looks a lot more complicated, but I would like you to try this on your own. Same steps as before, get your system of equations and solve the system to get your final answers, and then come back to check your work. Let's check your work. Now, I know this is kind of an ugly looking problem. If you do not have these answers, so you know you went wrong somewhere, you might want to pause the video so you can look at these step-by-steps a little bit closer to figure out where you went wrong. It was probably in the factoring step. So this one I had a times x squared plus 1 squared, so times itself. Now here's the key with this step. Remember, you can only distribute one thing at a time. So I distributed those together first, then I distributed the a to them to get this part. Now here I have 3 things being multiplied. I can only distribute 2 things first, so I distributed the x to there first to get that. Then I FOILed these together to get that section. And last I times those by x, distribute the x to get that part. Then I organized and simplified. So I've got a plus b goes to that 1, c goes to that 1, 2a plus b plus d goes to that 1, c plus e goes to the negative 1, and a goes to the 1. So when I write out my whole system, I notice I've already got 2 things that are solved for. So I started by plugging a into this first equation to solve for b. Then I plugged c into this fourth equation to solve for e. Then I plugged a and b into the middle equation to solve for d. Once again, lots of ways you can solve that. That's just the one that I noticed. Then I plugged everything in for A, B, C, D, and E to get this as my final answer. Now, let's do one more example for today's lesson, and then we're done. Notice that this example is not factored in the denominator, so we do need to do that first. If this factoring looks a little crazy to you, you can think of it as u substitution, where this x to the 4th becomes u squared, x squared is u, and then we have that. And then it's a little bit easier to see this factored out, like that. Multiply to 9, add to 6. Then we can plug x squared back into our u to get that this is x squared plus 3 squared. So once again, this is a combination of case 2 and 3. I have an irreducible quadratic, and I have a repeated factor. So here's what I'm going to have you try this time. I would like you to try to split up the fraction on your own using everything we've learned today. So split up the fraction into however many pieces it's going to need, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, however many letters it's going to need, and then come back to check if your split up fraction is correct before you keep working. So try that first. Split up your fraction and let's see how you do on that part on your own. Let's see how you did. So I have my irreducible quadratic there, and because it's repeated, I have it single here and then squared there. Because it's irreducible quadratic, I go down 1 degree, so ax plus b there, and cx plus d there. Now that you have it split up correctly, I want you to pause the video. This is our last problem of the day. Try to use all 7 steps to solve for A, B, C, D on your own, and then come back to check your work on this very last problem. Let's check your work on our last problem of the day. So we already split it up correctly. We're good on that part. Then we had to multiply out. We got that right out what we're left with. We had to FOIL those two. This one was totally fine because everything on top and bottom canceled. When I FOILed it, I got that. Then I organized it, brought the cubes together, the squareds together, the x's together, and the no x's together, and then set them equal to their individual parts. To get this system, A and B are already solved for, so I plugged A into the third equation to solve for E, and I plugged B into the last equation to solve for D. Plugged all my answers into there, and I simplified this a little bit to that to get my final answer for example 8. So that is everything about partial fraction decomposition. It will be on your test coming up and on your final. This is actually a really popular final question. You can guarantee a final question from this lesson on your final. It's always there. But now that you're done with 6.7, you can get started with your homework.